Now that the leather pieces for my daisy have been cased, they're still damp, but they have sat for a while. They have started to lighten up in color. They've firmed up. They're ready to go. It's time to form the flower. So in your kit, you will have two sets of these three pieces to make two daisies, and your little wooden stylus tool, which has one pointed end and one kind of angled end. We'll be using the pointed stylus end. And I'm going to start with the round centerpiece, which you'll notice is a little bit thicker leather than the petals. That way it has a little bit of more dimension to it. It'll stick up a little bit more and you'll just get more variety in sort of how the different parts of the flower look. So the first thing to do is to set this piece so that the smooth side is facing up. That's the kind of right side of the leather. And using the side of the stylus, just run it gently, pressing along that kind of cut edge along this round piece. It will just soften it down a little bit. You don't need to press so hard you're in danger of snapping your stylus or anything, but it does sort of soften that hard edge. You can see it right there, and will make it start to look a little bit more natural because it should have a more rounded look. So once you've done that, turn the centerpiece over so the fuzzy side's facing up, and then with your thumb just kind of go around it, slightly pushing the edges as if you're trying to almost curl them up a little bit. They won't go very far because it's a very small piece and the leather is not super thin, but you just want to start a little bit of a curve along the edge. So now you can see it's almost become like a slightly bowl shape there. So if I need to set it back down and just press the edges down onto the table to make sure that it's going to sit flat and everything. So at this point it's kind of got a little bit of a dome to it. Now with you can either use your finger, or if you've got let's see, I've got the end of a knife right here. I'm just going to press down the center a little bit. There you go. So it's got just a little bit of a kind of divot in the center that'll give it even more of kind of a detail to the way the center looks. Once you've done that, I'm just sort of fixing this. I might have pressed a little too hard and flattened it out. There we go. Once you've done that, take your stylus and with the pointed end, start just gently pressing it into the leather. And I still have the smooth side facing up right now. That's the side I'm making these marks on. And just kind of create a sort of spotted, freckled appearance all over. You can kind of see those little dots. You want them to be close enough together that you're really making a consistent overall texture, but you don't need them to be so close together that they completely disappear into themselves. And try to even do them as you come along the edge to sort of hold your tool at an angle and really get down onto that edge as much as you can. And last, I'm going to go around the center. And the center I definitely don't need to worry about pressing too hard because it's already pressed down. There we go. And once you've covered the whole center with this kind of speckled texture, you can go back and very gently sort of bend those edges back again if you feel like it got flattened out too much. As long as you're gentle, it's not going to completely ruin the texture or anything. And then if you want to, you can even go back and add a little bit more to that center part if you feel like it's not standing out enough. There we go. And then your centerpiece will look like this. I'm going to set that off to the side and pick one of the petal pieces. They are the same until you start, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. And with the stylus end, I'm going to make 2 lines on each of these petals. Now these petals are quite small, so if you find that it is easier or you just prefer to make one single center line down the center instead of 2, that will look fine and it will absolutely work. What I'm doing is making 2 lines, as you'll see in the pattern, that approximately split the petal into thirds. It does not need to be exact. They just need to be, fairly centered not, way off to the side, and fairly consistent spacing wise. But remember that these petals are going to be formed and curled, and this really is just a texture. So don't worry if they get a little bit uneven or you just feel like individually they don't look perfect, because it really won't be a problem later. If you are someone who you just really want them to be perfect, you could absolutely trace them on. You can go on lighter if to make sure you've got your lines placed, and then go back pressing a little bit harder. So you could see as I was doing that, I need to make sure to be pressing, there you go, I'm trying to get the angle so you can see the lines, pressing hard enough to make some pretty defined lines. If you're pressing so hard that you find that you're catching on the leather with the stylus, or it feels like it's pulling, or you feel like the stylus might be damaged by pressing too hard, then you probably do need to lighten up. If it seems as if you need to go back over the lines like I'm just doing, you can absolutely do that. If you get any sheen of moisture as you're putting these lines on, then you definitely need to let your leather sit a little bit longer because it is too wet. They should go on there pretty easily and you should be able to see them. So once those lines are on all of the petals, we need to do some forming. So just starting anywhere and going around with my pointer finger and my thumb, I am just gently squeezing, kind of gently pinching along the center of the petal so that the edges, the sides, push up. So still I've got the smooth side again because that's where we're making the marks, and I'm just going to go around the whole thing. Because these petals are so small, this is a pretty quick and easy process. And you should find that the leather is still easy to form. It's not, it hasn't gotten really stiff, but it should stay pretty much where you put it. When you pinch these petals shut, you should definitely find that they stay there. If they're kind of flopping out of shape, and the leather sort of just feels very floppy, it's probably still a little bit too damp and might need to sit a bit longer. If you find that it feels kind of stiff and they're sort of springing back out of shape, it might actually have gotten too dry. But when you really hit that right moisture level, you will know, because it just all kind of does what you want it to do. Once you've gone around and pinched each of those, the next thing to do is kind of near the end, this widest part of the petal, just take your thumbs, and it's because it's so narrow, you kind of need to do it one side at a time, and just bend that back just a tiny bit. This does add a little bit of extra sort of shape to the petal, but again, these daisies are very small, so if you find it that you don't feel like this is doing much to change the look of it, or you just find this step a little bit difficult to kind of get your thumbs to do it, or the leather's just not cooperating, you can just skip to the next step, and your petals absolutely will look fine. It's kind of depending on how much extra time you want to spend just to add a little bit of extra shaping on there. But because these petals are so small and narrow, it's a very sort of a very small amount that you can really bend those back. Hopefully you can see a slight difference as I'm going around and doing this. All right. So now that I've done that, I'm going to get out my little cardboard tube. This one is just a cut down and taped toilet paper roll, I think. It needs to be about an inch across. And then I'm going to set my petal piece on top of it and gently press it down in. It doesn't need to go terribly far, just far enough that the petals start to kind of stick up like that. Once you've done that, put your finger on the top and gently hold it down just so it doesn't move. And with your other hand, you can start carefully curling back each of the petals. And doing this over this roll, let's see what I'm doing here, works a little better than just doing each petal individually while holding it in your hands, just because it kind of keeps everything on a symmetrical circular shape. And if you do each one individually, sometimes the whole thing, the shaping can get a little bit wonky. So it makes it a little bit easier like that. It keeps everything even. So now that I've done that, I've got a piece that looks like this, but obviously I have another petal piece. So I'm going to consider this first one to be the one that's going sort of underneath the furthest down piece. There'll be another petal piece on top and then the center on top of that. So once this piece is shaped, you can just set it, take it out of the ring and set it down on your work surface. Move it up there. And now I'm going to swap out to another one that is basically in the same spot in its forming that this one is. So basically, once you have done the same forming with both of your petal pieces, you just pick which one you want to be the topmost piece. And what we want to do is allow that top petal layer to have its petals just stick up a little bit more than the bottom layer, because it will give them more dimension and more space between the layers once everything's put together. The easiest way to do this, and to make sure that the center also is going to look really integrated into the whole flower when it's all put together, is just set the center in there, hold it gently with your thumb, and then with your other hand just gently push the base of the petals up against the edge of the center, just a little bit. You don't need to go too crazy with it, but it does help. And then once you've done that, set that one in your little tube so that it's just sitting in kind of like this. And you can leave the center in there just so everything kind of stays where you want it. And then let those two pieces dry completely. This one can be left on the flat surface, because if it flattens out a little bit, that's just fine. And leave them to dry completely, ideally overnight, before moving on to coloring and assembly.